In this video, we're going to cover revenue and pricing models. I think you're really going to enjoy what we have to talk about today and get ready to dig in really deep to understand how you're going to price your product or service, understand how much money you make per each sale of your product or service, and then how do I get to the income level that I want to get to, and how many units do I need to sell to get to those income levels, okay? So that's what we're going to be discussing today, the revenue and pricing model. But before we jump in there, here's a pop quiz for you. What is this a picture of? Does anyone know? It's a revenue stream. Get it? Ha ha ha. Okay, so that's humor. We're going to jump into what we're talking about today. All right, before we start, let's review the process. Remember, we're all about creating the superpower that we talked about. So what we do, we start with a bright idea. Once again, the first thing we do is we start doing customer discovery. Talk to potential customers, potential vendors, potential suppliers, trying to really understand the problem that's being solved and whether our solution could really solve that problem. And what we're trying to identify is who is that specific target customer that has that problem or that opportunity we're going after, and what is the value we're bringing to them. What problem are we solving, or what opportunity are we going after? What's the value prop? Now, as part of that process, if we start feeling really good about what we're doing, then we start looking at, okay, this is great. How big is that market? That's why we look at market size. Is there only 2 people in the market, or is this really a market that looks like it has a lot of potential? If it does have potential, who else is doing it? That's the competition, right? Once again, don't fear the competition, but understand who the competitors are, right? Make sure we know what our value proposition is and what our differentiators are to our competition. What makes our customers, the one we're going after, want to buy our product or service over the competitors, okay? And then last week, what we talked about was the minimum viable product. It's great that I have this beautiful vision of where I want to take my product or my service, my company, right? But where do I start? What is the minimum set of features, or what's the first version that I can bring to market where I can actually get customer validation? People will actually buy it, and then I can go to release 2, version 3, version 4, and stuff like that, okay? And then also define more in detail that customer archetype. Who is that customer? Make that customer come to life. And why does it matter that we understand our different customer archetypes? Because when we go into marketing mode, we need to understand who they are, where they hang out, what influences them, where are they, so we can then, when we do our marketing campaigns, we can reach out to them, okay? So in this week's video, what we're going to do is then take those and we're going to break it down into, all right, let's go look at what channels are we going to sell to, right? So how do we get to those customers? What channels are we going to utilize to get there? And then when I sell a product or a service, what are my unit economics? Meaning, how much money do I make per sale of my service or my product, okay? That's the unit economic piece. And then we're going to look at, okay, what about pricing? How do we price ourselves? Maybe look at some competition and say, okay, where do we want to price ourselves in the spectrum of things, okay? So looking at unit economics and pricing, okay? So the 3 boxes that we're going to cover in the business model canvas are essentially the customer relationship box here, right? The channels and also revenue streams, okay? And so with that, let's start by talking about a little bit about channels, okay? How do you get your product or service to your customer? That's what we're going to talk about. So it turns out that there's virtual channels, right? And there's also physical channels. And then there's actually physical products and physical products. Products that are both virtual and physical, right? In terms of that. So if you look at it, let's just go through some examples. A physical channel and a physical product, that's what we know typically as, let's say I go to Walmart, right, which is a physical place. So that's a physical channel, right? And I'm buying a physical product like a can of beans, can of corn, right? So I'm buying a physical product in a physical channel, right? A virtual product, right, in a physical location would be something like, let's say, an insurance company. I go to my insurance agent and I get car insurance. So that's a virtual product, but I'm buying it at a physical location at the insurance agent. Or maybe it's a bank. I'm getting a certificate of deposit, a virtual product, in a physical location, right? And then you got, the virtual products are actually physical products sold in a virtual channel. So that would be going to a virtual channel like Amazon and buying a physical product like a book, right? And then you got the virtual like, I guess you got Twitter, you got Google, you got some of those kind of mechanisms, okay? So a couple things to think about. How will you get your product to your customers, right? Do you want to do it yourself? Do you do it through someone else? Do you do it through some retail channel like brick and mortar? Are you going to do it in a food truck? Are you going to do it in a drive-through? Are you going to do it in a wholesale? Sell it to somebody else who sells it in terms of that, right? Or do you going to bundle it? Is it part of someone else's product? So those are all some different ways to look at, how are you going to get your product to your customers, right? The other thing about is think about your customers. How do they want to buy your product, okay, from your channel? Do they want it the same day? Do they want it delivered and installed? Do they want it downloaded? Do they want it bundled with other products? Do they want it as a service? Many different ways. So start thinking about how you think they're going to actually consume, buy those products, as well as, how are you going to deliver those different products to your customers, okay? So now we're going to get into the meat of what we want to talk about today. And the first part of what we want to talk about, which is really the economics. How do the economics work, okay? So pay attention because you're going to have to figure out this for your own product or service, right, for your business, okay? So this is what we're going to do is we're going to break down different pieces of what it's going to cost you to bring it to market, okay? So a couple concepts here. First one is the cost of goods. So this is an important concept to know because people are going to ask you, hey, what's your COGS or what's your cost of goods sold look like, okay? And what that is how much does it take to make one of my products, okay? So for instance, I'll go use my trusty Mountain Dew. So if I'm the maker of Mountain Dew, my cost of goods sold is how much does it cost to create one Mountain Dew, okay? So let's say I created a new drink. Let's say it's not Mountain Dew, it's something different, okay? What does it cost for Bill to create one version of his product, okay? So let's just say, I know this is ridiculous, but it cost me $1. That would be my cost of goods sold, okay? SG&A is overhead, right? General administrative expenses and R&D expenses. So this is what we typically refer to as a sort of overhead, okay? In most startups, we sort of keep our overhead low because we don't want a lot of it in here. And then the other section is profit, okay? So how much money are we going to actually put in our pockets in terms of profit for that business? And then you got end user discounts and you got a list price, right? So let's say I didn't have any overhead. I was actually buying these from a bottler that was doing it. My cost of goods sold is $1 per bottle. And then let's say I want to have $1 in profit. So my list price would be $2. So I'm selling these things at $2 on the market. Every time I sell one, I get $1. And then, it takes me $1 to my bottler, basically. Okay. And that's a direct sales channel. That means I'm selling this directly to you. Okay. Now you could take that same concept and say, you know what, Bill, selling one at a time, that's fine, but it'd be better if you sold a lot more, right? So in this case, I added a reseller. Let's say a local grocery store chain like Hy-Vee or Walmart Supercenters. So I find a reseller who's going to sell these, right? My cost of goods sold is still the same, right? My overhead is probably still the same. Now the difference is the reseller now gets a piece of it, a pretty large, substantial piece of it, right? And so my profit margin shrinks. Per unit, my profit actually shrinks, but because I'm going through a reseller, hopefully I'm selling many, many more, right? Being able to sell through 300 Hy-Vee stores with my product should hopefully give me a lot more sales, which means in the end, I'll have a lot more profit, but per unit, I'm making less profit. Hopefully that's starting to make sense a little bit, right? Now, there are some situations where there might be even a distributor that's in the picture, right? So in that case, they get a piece of it. The reseller gets a piece of it. So let's say I had a product which I thought was fantastic. This super drink, it's called the green drink, and it's green. It's great for the environment. It's great for the body. It gives you energy, but it's actually good for you. Okay. So Bill's creating this. The cost of goods sold is still $1, right? I don't have any overhead. Let's just say, right. But now what I do is the distributor is the one that's actually going to connect up, or I try to get my product into Walmart. It's going to get, the distributor is the one that's going to get me into Hy-Vee, is going to get me into Safeway stores, Kroger's down south, in a multitude of super targets as well, right? So the distributor gets a piece because they're connecting up with the resellers. The resellers, sort of the ones that you're actually buying the stores from, get their piece. And so the list price is still the same. I'm just getting an even smaller margin, right? A smaller profit per everyone that I sell. But man, if I'm selling this through Target, through Walmart, through Hy-Vee, through Safeway, through Kroger, I'm selling many, many, many units of this, and I'm really making some good money, right? And so just realize that it's not necessarily always about how much we make per unit, but it also depends on the channels that we utilize, right? And the reason that we go through channels is we can sell more at a little less profit, but we can sell more units. And what you're going to have to figure out is what's the right balance for your company, right, and your product or your service. So we're going to go through some examples, and hopefully that makes it a little bit more clear for you here, okay? So let's use the example of book publishing. So, you write a book and you want to basically sell it, right? So you want to sell it on Amazon, who's probably the retailer to the customer. There's somebody that gets you into the Amazon. There's a printer that prints the book. There's other people that help you edit and some of those kind of things. So there are a number of players that are in there. So like, for instance, my book, right? These are not quite accurate, but it's pretty close, right? So my book, if you were buying it on Amazon, is about $20, okay? And basically, Amazon makes the most when you buy it, so they get $8 of it. The printer gets a couple dollars for printing it. My wholesalers actually get picking up $5, and then in the end, the publisher or the writer or the author in this case picks up $5, right? So just realize what are the economics? What are the channel economics in your business, right? Sure, I'd love to sell it to you directly, but I don't have the distribution of an Amazon, right? And I don't have a printer where I can make my books. But can you see, you need those different partners in your channel and your supply chain in order to make that happen, okay? Another example. This one's an interesting one because let's say I'm selling lettuce. I'm a farmer that, I grow lots of lettuce, right? If I go to the farmer's market, okay? I sell these at $3 a head, okay? The farmer's market gets 10%, so I give them 30 cents every time I sell a head of lettuce, and so I get 90% of that to me. So I make a profit of, let's say, $2.70 every time I sell this head of lettuce, right? Fantastic. I mean, that's a great margin, right? So I go to the farmer's market and I sell 100 heads that day. Well, I'm doing really well. So I bring home $270, right? Which isn't bad. There's no judgment in terms of this, okay? But in that same scenario, if I'm a lettuce farmer, and let's say I actually sell it through, let's say, some other ones, right? So I go through a distributor who then sells it to a wholesaler that gets me into Walmart, and they're retailing it. So Walmart, wants to sell it cheaper, so that's at $2.50, and then they pick up $1 for every sale. So Walmart's doing pretty well. My wholesaler gets 37 cents. My distributor gets 25 cents, right? And I get 88 cents. So at first look, you're going, wait a minute, Bill, you got $2.70 every time you sold a head of lettuce over at the farmer's market, right? But man, selling it to Walmart, you're only making 88 cents every time you sell a head of lettuce. Yeah, but since there's 3,000 or 2,000 Walmarts around the country as far as super Walmarts, right, selling my heads of lettuce, they can sell 10,000 heads of lettuce, and if I make that 88 cents, that's $8,800 that day that I made, okay? So once again, not saying one is better than the other, but realize depending on what channels you use, you're going to be sharing the profits, but hopefully what you're also doing is gaining more unit sales, right? So every business is going to be different in terms of what the right mix is in terms of that. That's what you guys need to be thinking about, okay? Now here's where I talk about let's get real. What does that mean, right? And so what we're going to talk about next is something that's really important. It's what I do for every one of the startups and ideas that I come up with, but for some reason, we don't talk about it, right? There's no books written on the subject. There's no podcast that I know of talking about it, but yet it's something that really, really does matter to us. And so I want each of you to start soaking this in, and we're going to get real here, okay? And what that means is part of that business planning is what are our income goals, okay? I know we don't like to think about it sometimes, but from a business standpoint, I can almost assure you, all of you have thought about how much money would I like to make from my business, or from my business idea, okay? And so this is what I want you guys to do as well, and think through this. So this is what I do, okay? This is an example, and this is what I want you to come up with, these 4 targets. The first target that I always think about is how much do I want to make? If I could, let's say I love this business idea and I could do this, like, oh man, this is what I really want to do, right? How much money do I need to make in order to quit my job or quit my other things and do this full time? What does that number look like? Okay, so come up with a number in terms of what would it take. Now, this isn't what I really want to make. This is what, if I could make this much money, I would do it full time. And my belief is if I do it full time, I can even do a better job, right? I can get to my second target, which is really a good salary. This is how much this is the one that I desire. I'd like to make this much money and I'd be doing pretty well, okay? The third target is, man, if I could make this much money though, if I could make this much money doing what I love, this my business, I could do this pretty much forever. If I can make this much money, I would be living large. I'd be living well as far as that goes, okay? And then I want all of you, no matter if that's what your goal is or not, to think about number 4, target number 4, which is what? How do I go big? How do I make $1 million, right? And the whole idea there is I want you to stretch your mind and how do we scale the business, right? That's the conversation we're going to have next week. When we look at yours, I want to know where you want to start, how many things you need to sell to get to that standpoint, how do we get to the good, how do we get to the target, but then how do we change it up to say, okay, if I really wanted to take it, what would I need to do in order to scale it, okay? And so I'll give you some specific examples to see how that all works, okay? So for me, a lot of times when I'm kicking off a business, it's really, man, I love this. This is amazing. You know what? If I could do this, if I can make $50,000, right, I would stop and do this full time, right? And I know that if I did this full time, I could probably do a lot better than that, and I could probably drive into that $75,000. That's my good salary number, okay? And then my target is that, man, if I could make, 6 figures, if I can do $100,000 doing this, what I love, I could probably just do this forever, right? I mean, as long as I can go, I would take that all day long, okay? And then my target number 4, let's say, is $1 million. What's it take for me to actually create $1 million for myself in this business? What would I have to do? How would I scale that business? That's what that's about. So those are your 4 targets. I want you to think about on your own. What are your numbers, right? What does that look like for you, okay? Now, in some of your cases, it might not be that you even want to do it full time. If that's the case, that's fine as well, right? There's nothing that says you have to do it full time. For me, let's say, I love my job, right? And so I'm doing what I actually love. Now, if I could come up with a product idea that makes me a couple $100 a month extra, couple $1,000 a month extra, okay? Can you sort of see that? Almost the same kind of logic going, okay, I don't want to quit my job, but man, if I could make a couple $1,000s a month, $24,000 a year extra by doing that, and man, if I can make another 50 grand, right, as my target, and continue to do what I'm doing, oh man, that would be tremendous. What's it going to take to do that, right? So think of it that way. So either full-time, or if this is just going to be a side gig because you have something that you're already doing that you absolutely love, but you're trying to make some additional cash, look at it from that perspective, okay? And so next week in the breakout groups, that's what we're going to be talking about, okay? So, example, okay? And you guys know that, I try to throw a little bit of fun and humor in this, as well as you guys know I'm kind of quirky as far as things go. So this is a business I want to create, right? Not really, but it's kind of fun as an example. So I want to create this drone thing that you strap on your back and you can fly around. Pretty simple mechanism. There are propellers there, and I can control which way it goes and things like that, okay? So this is my product that I want to bring to market, okay? Now, if I take that product and I look at it, essentially it's going to cost me $1,000 to create, okay? So every unit that gets produced, I talk to the manufacturer. This is I've designed it all. It's all this. This is what I need to put together. I'm using some off-the-shelf hardware in terms of guidance systems and some of those, and about $1,000, right? I have some overhead because I got to store some parts and some of that. So basically, $500 worth of parts every time I sell one unit. Let's just say, right? And then I'm going to actually pay a salesperson $1,000 for every sale. Okay, that's sort of my model. And so every time I sell it, I make about $2,500. Okay, so the sales price is $5,000. So for every unit I sell for $5,000, I make $2,500 in profit. And then, the cost is $1,000. Okay, with this model, I'm sitting there going, I'm probably going to sell it directly because I don't know who would be the right reseller, or maybe there's a dealer network in the future somewhere. But initially, I'm just going to go after a direct sales model where I sell this directly. Okay. So now if I use these numbers that I've broken down into my chart, right, my targets. So in order to get to my level of $50,000, right, so, how much do I need to be able to do this full time? I need to sell 1.6 of these a month. And I'm sitting there going, okay. So one of the things that this does is like, selling 1.6, I don't think that's that tough of an ask necessarily. I think that's doable, right? Now, if I were to do this full time and I hit that mark and I'm doing it full time, I think I could sell 2. I could maybe even sell 3. If I sold 3.3 of these a month, 1 month, 3.3, okay? That's less than 1 a week. I'm making $100,000 in profit, okay? And so that gives you either a confidence of, hey, you know what? This is something that I can pursue, right? Now, if I want to go big, and I want to, let's say, make $1 million from this, I got to sell 33 a month. Now I got to sit there and say, wait, 33 a month, I don't know if I can sell that many. That's more than one a day, right? And I don't know if I have that kind of capacity to go sell. I've got to come up with a different model to make it to that level, okay? So now if I look at this and I go, okay, what if I hire a salesperson? What's that look like, okay? In this case, I'm going to hire, let's say, a recent college grad over here at Drake University, right? I know a number of students. I come in and says, hey, do you want to help sell these, right? In fact, I'm going to pay you $60,000, okay? And what you're going to do is basically sell 5 a month, a little more than one a week, right? And I'm telling you, at $5,000, you should be able to sell twice that many, but that's the goal. The goal is 5 a month, okay? And so in that case, my customer acquisition cost is actually $1,000. So if they sell 60 units, it's like giving them a commission of $1,000 each time. So that's how I got that unit cost there, okay? And so if I take those numbers and I start looking at it, if I'm paying $60,000, they're selling 60 units at a profit margin of $2,500, I'm making $150,000 from that salesperson, okay? So that salesperson gets paid 60, that college student that I just hired, right? And if they actually did a good job, sold 5 a month, I'm making $150,000, right? So let's say I do it, prove it first, I hire a salesperson, they prove it, and then I start expanding. If I hire 5 salespeople, I can get to a level of, about $750,000 of profit. If I hired 50 salespeople, so let's say I have one person in every state that's just working the whole state, and they're selling on average 5 units a month, 60,000, 5 units a month, profit about 150 profit a year, right? That's $7.5 million. That is how I would scale, right? So if you think about that, why are those things important? Because the first thing that I would do is prove that I could sell it first. Do people want to buy this, right? And I go out there and sell them. And if I'm starting to see success and going, you know what? I'm selling 5, I'm selling 7 a month. That's fantastic. Then my scaling strategy could be, I want to hire some salespeople. Get some young people, because once again, this doesn't require a lot of necessarily knowledge. It requires a little bit of get up and go to go do it, right? But you don't have to have tremendous product knowledge. What we're trying to do is figure out who wants to buy these things, right? And then I can hire 5 salespeople. If they all hit their numbers, then I'm expanding to every state as far as that goes, okay? So that's one example of what you're going to be pulling together for your product or service. Let's go over a couple different other examples. So let's say I'm a consultant. So it's a little different. It's a service, okay? And in this case, what we're looking at is that I'm going to do 1 or 2 day corporate seminars, right, that people bring me in to talk about, let's say they're bringing me in to talk about AI in the workplace, okay? So that's my topic. You guys can have whatever topic you want, but I'm going to talk about AI in the workplace, 1 or 2 day corporate things, and I'm going to charge $2,500, right? I'm also going to have these 1 or 2 day events where I'm going to charge $100 for each attendee, and I'm thinking on average I'd have about 25 attendees, so it's about $2,500. So every time I put one of these on, I get about $2,500 in overall price, okay? In this case, I'm going to keep it simple, right? So my cost of goods sold, I'm going to say is 0, overhead 0, and sales is 0, all right? So basically, I'm making $2,500 every time I put one of these on. Now, for tax purposes, obviously, my laptop and as a business expense, my travel cost is a business expense. If I buy markers, pens, those are all business expenses. But from a business standpoint, business modeling standpoint, I'm just going to say, every time I put one on, I make $2,500, okay? So now going back to my trusty targets that we're looking at, what's it going to take for me to do this full time, right? I wanted to make $50,000. That means I've got to do 1.6 of these every month, okay? So they're going, hey, that's pretty reasonable. If I only do, if I do a little over 1.5 a month, I'm hitting my target. And then if I focus on it full time, man, you know what? I think I can get to, 2.5 a month. That gets me to my $75,000 figure. If I do a little over 3 a month, I'm at my $100,000 figure, okay? You see how that goes? All right, that's what you're going to be thinking about. But in this case, if I wanted to make $1 million, I have to sit there and say, whoa, I got to do 33 in a month. You know what? There is no way, actually it's physically impossible, to do 33 of these a month. So if that's what I want to do, I need to figure out a different way to make that happen, okay? So in this case, what if I were to actually franchise it, okay? And so what I was going to do is help, let's say I'm going to hire people that are going to go do this in every state, and I'm going to help them get to $100,000, okay? And then as I help them, I'm going to get 20% of their fees in terms of that. So if I do that, if I have a franchise in every state, and then I can get to my $1 million. So I'm helping them in terms of that. Okay? So that's just another way to look at it. It's a different business model. It's a services model, but that's a consultant. Okay? Another example. Let's say I wanted to create a coffee, right? And I'm going to call it Smart Brew, right? And the whole idea is that it's got some nootropics. So not only does it give you caffeine and energy, it actually gives you some other kind of things, vitamins and other kinds of things that make you sharper, helps you with your focus, really gets into some of those, right? So that's called Smart Brew, okay? And in this case, let's say it's $20 to actually create, right? So my whole box of coffee in there, about $20 to create it. I've got some overhead. In this case, I'm going to have a reseller, but let's say my profit margin is 20, right? So I'm going to sell it for 60 bucks, which is kind of pricey, but $60 for the box, okay? And I make $20 every time I sell it, okay? So now, if you look at it, you know, so here, this is a common mistake that entrepreneurs make. So let's say I have this, right? I've created it, and it's like, wow, this is cool. Bill has a product, right? And I go out there and I get, you know, I'm selling it, and then I call Curtis up. Curtis, I got the Smart Brew, and let's say he buys it. It's like, woo, fantastic. I just made a sale, right? And then I call someone else. I call up Randy. Randy buys it. Yes, man, that's 2 sales today. That's fantastic, right? But if you think about it, I just sold 2, and I'm ready to go celebrate. I mean, I just made 2 sales today. This is fantastic. You know, I'm going to go, let's go celebrate, right? I take out the crew, and we're going to go celebrate. But if you think about it, I sold 2 at a profit margin of 20, so I've made $40. I put $40 in my pocket, okay? So now I go out there and celebrate. Guess what? If I buy dinner for the first round of drinks is on me, there goes all my profit. I spent more on the celebration than I actually made, right? So even though I'm excited about selling it, this is why the targets matter. Because if you look at it, in order to get to $50,000, if this is the income that I'm trying to get to, right, I've got to be able to sell 6.8 of these every day, right? So if I sold 2, I'm not at my 6.8. Remember, I got to sell 6.8 tomorrow and at 6.8 the following day, right? So guess what? Selling 1 box at a time is probably not the right way to sell this, right? If I want to actually get to these income totals. Now, on the other hand, if I'm just trying to make a couple $100, right? Selling 1 a day, you know, that's not bad. 1 a day, 20 a day, you know, and then I'm doing it for, you know, that's $600 in a month. That's not bad. That's good side income in terms of that. But if I want to get to $50,000, I got to sell 6.8 of them a day. So now I got to look at it. Do I sell them through my website? I really got to look at how do I resell? What channel am I actually going to use to go do that, right? If I'm going to get to $100,000, I need to sell 13, right? Almost 14 of these every day, okay? Every day in order to get my $100,000 figure. That means I really need some good distribution in order to make that happen, okay? It's not impossible. Happens a lot, okay? So now if I were to go into 306 Hy-Vee stores, right, and they sell 2 a month, okay? So I'm sitting there going, okay, if I can get into all the Hy-Vees, and once again, my product only gets 2, only 2 of them go off the shelf every month, that's $150,000 in my pocket, okay? Do you see that? That's why that's much more powerful than me just selling it over to Curtis and Randy. I made 2 sales, that's great. I made 40 bucks, right? But if I can actually get it into Hy-Vee and they sell 2 a month, that's $150,000 in my pocket. Now, if they sell 15 a month, right, that's even better. I'm making $1.1 million just through those Hy-Vee stores. So if I can get them off the shelf there, I'm doing really well, right? Now, if I can get into somewhere like Walmart Supercenters where there's, 3,500 stores, guess what? If they sell only 2 a month, that's $1.7 million, okay? So can you see a product like this? What you got to think about is, am I just doing it for some side money, which is fantastic, right? Or if I'm really going to try to do this full time or make larger money, I really have to think about how I'm going to go after my sales channels, right? So in this case, I might sell 1 or 2, at the beginning just to see if I can get some good customer feedback. But then I'm going to spend, if this is what I want to do and I want to make some serious money on this, I'm going to have to focus on the channels of delivery, right? So my time's got to be spent trying to get it into Hy-Vee, getting it into Walmart, getting into Super Target, getting into Kroger or Safeway, whatever. All those distribution, Come and Go could be another outlet. I mean, a number of those types of places, okay? So hopefully that's starting to make sense to you. So that's the first thing that I want you to think about. How much money do you want to make on those different 4 targets? For every sale that you make, what's your unit economics? How much money are you making every time you make one sale of your product or service, okay? Next, we're going to talk about revenue streams. How are we going to price this thing, okay? So the two questions basically are, what is the revenue model? How are you going to extract money from the customer? How are they going to pay for it, right? And then the other piece is, how am I going to price it, okay? So that's what we're going to cover next, okay? So it turns out that there are actually a number of different ways to extract money, different ways for your customer to pay for a potential product and service. For example, the most obvious one that probably comes to mind is what's called an asset sale. I have a physical asset like a Tesla or Christian Dior sneakers or Swiss cheese Montera plant, canoe, whatever. It's an actual product, and I give them money, they give me product. That's an asset sale. It's a physical product, or it could be a virtual product, but I'm giving them money, then they give me a product or service, okay? There's usage fee, right? So if you actually drive it on the interstate, and this one's what, K-Tag? So K-Tag is in Kansas, so every time I drive through the toll booth, they charge me. So every time I use it, I get charged, right? Same with water, electricity. The more I use, the more I pay, right? As well as, let's say, website hosting, like with Amazon Web Services, right? There's subscription fee. Stuff like Salesforce.com, but probably more commonly like Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, all those different services. You pay a monthly fee, and you can use it as much as you want for that month, right? So that's a subscription fee, right? Then there's renting. So, if I don't need it all the time, I just need a U-Haul truck for this weekend on Saturday. So I rent a 24-foot truck, I load up my stuff, go out and bring it back. So it's a fee for temporary access, right? So that's renting or leasing. Same with renting, let's say, an apartment, renting a car, renting party goods. So that's another way to extract money from your customer, right? There's also the ability to license for intellectual property. So my granddaughter likes Frozen, right? She specifically likes Elsa and Anna. And so if I wanted to make a product with their image on it, right, I would have to contact Disney and pay them a licensing fee to utilize that on my product, whatever that product is, right? That's another way to sort of actually monetize what you have. So if you developed a brand, somebody can license your brand to put onto their own product, okay? Advertising. Google AdWords, you can have Facebook advertising, just off of people's apps you can advertise. So you're basically paying a fee, or they're paying a fee for advertised placement on, let's say, your platform, okay? There's intermediation fee. This is where you're enabling a relationship or a transaction between parties, like Amazon. So if I buy a goods or something from them, like a flower pot, right? eBay, so something specialized, an autographed version of blah, 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 and then eBay gets a piece of it. Airbnb, a place to stay that's owned by somebody. So that's an intermediation fee. So hopefully you see that there's a lot of different ways that we can extract money from the customer. So what you got to figure out is, how does the customer want to pay for your service? What is the best way to do that? And then the second piece of that is, how are we going to price it? Okay. And so what are the tactics that we're going to utilize to price your product? Okay. There are generally, there's different approaches, but generally a lot of people talk about cost-based pricing. And what that is how much does it cost? So it costs me, $400 to create my product. And so I'm going to mark it up 20% and sell it to the market. So in that case, it's $400. If that's my product cost, 20% is $80. So I'm going to sell it for $480. Okay. We don't like cost-based pricing. Okay. So I want you to think more like value-based pricing, right? And basically competitive-based pricing, okay? Not necessarily cost-based, right? Usually what happens if you're in cost-based, you start getting to the point where your margins will start whittling down, and if you miscalculate, you'll continue to lose money, right? For instance, the Apple iPhone, approximately their high-end iPhone probably costs about $500 in cost of goods sold, right? And then what do they sell it to the market at? $1,250? But can you see there's a large margin in there for Apple to make money, but there's also variability in there to offer more discounts, to get more people involved in the sales of the transaction. They could actually do financing plans. There's a lot of different variabilities because they know that the market says that it's basically worth about $1,250. Consumers will pay that. When I'm at the end of that version cycle and I come out with my next version of my product, so I'm moving from 15 to 16, right? I can discount this, but not lose a tremendous amount of money necessarily. I might even actually still make money on sale of these, even though I've discounted it, and now I have my next product to market, right? So there are a lot of different reasons for that. So don't think of a cost base, but look at it from a value base. So what does that typically look like? What I really would want you to look at is competition. right? Look at competition as an influence. Now if someone has a monopoly, it's going to affect how it looks, right? But if it's pure competition, what does that look like? Where are your competitors, right? And so that's what we want you to do is like, what is their product, right? If you can, figure out what their costs are and also what their prices are, okay? You definitely figure out what their prices are, but man, if you can figure out what their costs are in that, that's fantastic as well. And then what pricing will make them, sort of feel worse, but also how do you feel about your pricing? So here's a couple examples. So this is an old chart, right? But it shows cell phones, okay? So back in the day, there had these ultra low-end phones. Basically, they were set phones with big dials on them, right? You guys remember those. And then they had probably flip phones kind of down this way. In the next segment, they had, some more functionality. And then you had these ultra premiums. These were the iPhones, right? And so if you look at it, none of these are bad products. It's just what they're going to do is they're going to go after a different segment of the market and they would price differently, right? So this phone here is $1,000. This phone down here is basically free, right? Depending on what service you signed up for and all that. But essentially, this one might cost $100. This one costs $1,000, right? And then you got $500 phones and some of that. So, if you can, map out what your competition looks like and how are you going to position within that competition? How do you want to price what you're doing? And why does that make sense, right? Here's some cars, right? So if you look at this car scenario, you've got classy cars, sportsy cars, you got, more expensive cars, you got less expensive cars. All of them are successful. So it's not to say that anyone's better than anybody else. It's how they position themselves in the market. It's a high-end car. So if it's like a Porsche that's, high-end, pricey, sporty, you're probably not going to sell as many units as you would, let's say, a Toyota car that's aimed at the mid. It's not the cheapest car, but you're going to sell quite a few of those, right? And so that's what you're looking at is how do you sort of look at that, right? Another example, when I created a consulting firm, one of the things that we were trying to do is our value proposition was we were going to get you the same services as a Deloitte and Accenture, these big national, actually global firms that are charging $400 an hour, right? We're going to give you that same thing, excuse me, but charge you in the area of, a couple $100 an hour, okay? $150, $200 an hour. And then we are pricing ourselves higher than the local consulting firms and saying, yeah, you can hire them, but you're not going to get the same quality, right? You're going to get the same quality as a global firm, but because we're local, we're going to charge you guys less, right? And now these fantastic companies, very successful, right? Fantastic company, very successful. Fantastic company, very successful. So it's not that one is more successful. It's just they're aimed at different target markets, right? So we knew who our clients were going to go after, right? Some of these large companies need to go with a big name because basically if something goes wrong, they have a name that's to blame and then they don't have to blame themselves for making that mistake. They can blame, hey, we went with the best. This is what it is, right? Ours was, hey, we're going to give you just the same advice as them, but at fraction of the cost or half the cost, right? And you'll get that same quality, but then we'll help you make it successful. That was our value proposition, okay? So I want each of you to think about, who are your competitors, where do they price, and where are you going to put yourself, right? And don't always assume that you just want to be the low price leader, because unless you can make your thing a lot cheaper than everybody else, that's not always the best strategy. In fact, what you're trying to do is figure out where you want to position yourself, based on the competition, okay? So hopefully it's starting to all add up, right? What I want you to do is basically for next week, make sure you understand your economics. How much money do you make per each unit sale, right? Or service, right? So every time you make a sale, how much money in profit, how much does it cost of goods sold look like, okay? And then how many do I need to sell in order to get to my target income goals? Remember, we had those 4 different targets, right? Do this full time, target, right? And then also, if I were to go big, what's it going to look like? Those are the things. And then think about how I can scale that, right? That's the next one. What do I need to do to scale my business? Once again, we're not saying you all have to, okay? But as part of what we're doing in this program, I want you to think. I want you to be able to think bigger. Think about scaling strategies, right? And once again, whether you do that or not, it's okay. You don't have to. But to me, if you think about those, it might add different kind of things to you. It might change how you price it. It might change how you go to market initially too, right? How you set that up. So think about that. So what do I need to get to my income goals, right? How many do we need to sell? What do I need to scale that, right? And then show us, right, basically how you're going to price it. And basically tell me how you're going to price it. and have some meat behind why you're pricing it that way. Convince us that that's a great pricing strategy, right? And so that's what we're going to be basically doing for next week. All right. So that's it for this video. I will give you an assignment in a different video.